Hey there, welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd Construction Podcast. Last time we saw Brian and Heather, they had just signed off on Rick's plans for a much bigger house than they bargained for. After getting a hard lesson in permits, surveys, specialized tests, fees, and even more fees, their cash reserves are not looking as comfortable as they were a few months back. And they're starting to realize that Heather may once again be put on bed rest toward the end of her pregnancy. The stress of demoing the house is more than they expected and is causing them both to fear the worst. But Heather insists she's okay and won't let herself stress out too much. Instead, she's looking forward to the future and is happy to have such a big project to work on. While they are excited to be moving forward, they realize every day that the cost of building a new home is not as cut and dry as they assumed. To get everything on their wish list into their new home, Rick has expanded their ideal 3,500 square foot house to now 4,800 square feet. However, they feel like they're finally starting to experience some real progress on the project. And surely this is the last of the surprises, right? Despite going out of pocket beyond their expectations, they officially have a signed contract with an engineering firm to start their new dream home's structural design. And they have a set of plans in hand for their forever house with all the features they want, including a big game room, a media room, a study, and 5 bedrooms. The future's looking up, although maybe a little bit snug financially. As Brian and Heather sit in Rick's office, they feel some relief after signing off on the plans. Then Rick tells them it's time to get competitive bids from builders. Rick picks up on Brian and Heather's glances. It's clear they don't know where to begin with finding builders. He recommends 3 builders that he's worked with before and reassures Brian and Heather that working with any of these 3 will be great. Then Rick suggests they go ahead and email the plans to each of them so that they can get a budget for their lender. That night after work, Heather asks Brian to proofread her emails to the builders before sending them. They want to make sure they're giving a good first impression. Once they both feel good about the email, they hit send. Despite being late in the evening, they kind of stare at the computer screen waiting for a response. After a while, they realize the builders aren't going to respond that fast, and maybe tomorrow. We'll check back. The next day rolls around, then the weekend, then another week. They start sending follow-up emails and making calls to make sure the builders receive their quote requests. Finally, after a couple weeks, the first builder comes back with a quote for $350 per square foot. Ouch. It's definitely higher than they expected. The next one's got to be much lower. 2 months later, the second one finally gets back to them with a quote for $300 per square foot. It's better, but it's still high in their mind. They're holding out hope for the third one. However, the third one never gets back to them. After months of follow-up calls and emails, no response. Overall, Brian and Heather feel devastated at this point. At the quoted prices they received, they just can't afford to build the house that Rick designed. They talk about scaling the house back, but Rick tells them that the plans are finalized now, so scaling back means almost starting from scratch and paying all the fees over again, which is like $10,000. On top of everything else, Brian and Heather's neighborhood woes are growing too. The HOA and the city keep calling and sending demand letters because their wide open house is just not safe. Their voicemail is full, and they've lost track of the number of notices taped to the front door. The pool is infested with mosquitoes, and it's a drowning hazard because there's big holes in the fence that the neighborhood kids can climb through. They have no choice now but to spend another $5,000 to secure the house and another $18,000 to fill in the pool the right way and do all the proper testing with the permits this time. Brian and Heather feel like they couldn't burn cash as fast as they're spending it. Determined to find a better builder situation to try to save money, Heather starts asking around on the local Facebook groups. A woman replies and says her husband Derek just started his own business. He had been working for a production builder out in the burbs since college, but he got tired of working for a big corporation and just decided to start out on his own. Heather emails the plans to Derek, and he quickly responds with a quote of $180 a square foot. All the anxiety over money and her pregnancy are starting to lift. The next day, Brian, Heather, and Derek meet at a coffee shop near the property. Derek quickly puts Brian and Heather at ease. He's been building houses for years, and he has connections for materials and subcontractors at a low cost from his previous job. Plus, he offers to do the work based on a cost-plus model. This means if he can get it done cheaper, they will save even more money. And he's allowing them to buy their own appliances and fixtures to save his markup. Between the cost savings benefits of this deal and Derek's experience building houses quickly and cheaply, Brian and Heather are starting to feel some peace. Later that night, they crunched some numbers. With the current childcare expenses, the new baby on the way, and Heather's impending unpaid leave, and the unforeseen costs of their new home, the next few years are going to look different than they imagined. But they're excited to get things moving, and if Heather continues working for just a few more years, they'll be back in a financially stable place again. Things are looking up. Ecstatic to share the news, Heather calls Rick to tell him they found a builder. That's great, he says. What company is he with? Well, he's on his own, Heather says, but can you believe he's only $180 a square foot? Well, Rick says, what are his references? What other builds has he been the lead on? Not everyone who works in construction knows how to manage an entire custom house build. Heather politely ends the call. She calls Brian to tell him Rick must be annoyed they're not using one of his recommendations. They wonder to each other if they should slow down and dig deeper into Derek's abilities, or if maybe Rick just prefers his own people because he's getting a kickback or something like that. They decide that must be it, and they assure each other they've made a great choice with Derek. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. Joining me today is my friend Matt Sneller with Sneller Custom Homes up in Spring, Texas. Matt runs the company along with his wife, Jenny, and they've been in business for about 11 years, and they focus on design-driven custom homes and remodels. Is that right?
That's correct. Absolutely.
So Matt and I first met through a mutual friend, Toner Kirsting, who we're going to have on in a future episode, and we see each other regularly at HBA events and things like that. And Matt, you're one of those guys I know who does things right, and I wanted to get you on the show to talk about our story that we've just heard, what your processes are, and to help folks understand the right way to go about building a custom home. So,
absolutely.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here. Appreciate you having me.
So let's talk about our friends Brian and Heather in the story.
Getting themselves into a little bit of trouble.
So they bought a for sale by owner lot in the floodplain. They bought plans on the internet. When those didn't work out, they hired a cheap house designer.
What could possibly go wrong?
And now they've hired a builder who is transitioning from building production houses in the suburbs to building custom homes. He gave them a free estimate, and he said he could do it for $180 a square foot, and he might even save them more if they do a cost-plus contract.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff to unpack there that they did wrong.
There's a whole lot that went wrong there very quickly.
So let's start with how they selected a builder.
Yep.
She went on the local Facebook group and she was asking for recommendations. So that wasn't a bad thing necessarily because you're getting some referrals. But in this case, it wasn't really a referral. The guy's wife chimed in and said her husband's starting a new company, and he comes out and gives her a free estimate, which was based on his experience as a production builder. So I guess first big mistake, what's the difference between a custom home builder like yourself and a production builder out in the suburbs?
Yeah, there's a huge difference there. I think you can't knock the guy for wanting to go off on his own. We all had to start somewhere. And that's great for them to want to give him an opportunity at that. But there is a huge difference between production and custom. The production guys, I worked for a production builder when I first started my career, and you are basically just assembling a Lego set. It's all the purchase orders are there. All of your subs are already chosen for you. All you're doing is making sure that people show up and that the house gets finished. And so custom is so much different. There's so many parts and pieces that have to be decided along the way. There's changes. There's just too many decisions and too many things that happen that you don't know about as a production builder.
And when he gave him a kind of a price range, he said he could build it for $180 a square foot because that was his experience, using some of his subs and trades from when he was a production builder. What does that mean? Why is that a bad way to approach a project?
Well, everybody asks about the price per square foot, and I understand it that you want to make sure that you're in the right ballpark. The problem is in that situation specifically, that's probably the pricing he was used to getting at a production builder who they've got national accounts with suppliers and subcontractors. And so they're getting crazy pricing. He's not going to get that same pricing as a single custom builder building one or two projects a year. Overall, the problem with the price per square foot is, are we talking about living square footage, living or conditioned square footage? Or are we talking about total framed gross square footage? Because what we found is garages and patios, they cost almost as much as the house. Yeah, you don't have to air condition them, but we're putting sinks and appliances and flooring and ceiling treatments, and garages are getting sheetrocked and trimmed out and all of that stuff. And so garage doors are incredibly expensive. And so it really isn't that much cheaper. And so when we're talking to people about that price per square foot, we got to make sure they realize you can't just talk. If you say, I want to build a 3,000 square foot house, that's more than likely, that's probably 4,200 to 4,500 square feet
or 5,000 or more.
5,000. If you got a giant patio and you're a car guy and you've got a 4-car, 6-car garage, yeah, it's 5,000 square feet. And so that's a huge difference in your budget that you could completely blow your budget. If you designed your house thinking it's going to cost X amount and it ended up costing X plus, 300 grand, you're going to be in a pickle.
So are people realistic in general when they come to you with their budget for building a house?
Very, very rarely. I think they're usually surprised. I think it's got to be a conversation. I explain that about the total square footage versus living or conditioned square footage. And then we just talk about the things that affect that price. It's custom. Every decision is custom. Yes, we have a standard set of specifications that we go by, but it's still kind of a starting ground. And there's so many differences and decisions that need to be made that even to tell somebody what the price per square foot is, that's a starting range, but then the sky's the limit from there. And so it's really difficult to do that.
How should somebody arrive at a budget?
That's the $1 million question. I feel like clients have got to, there's this stigma that if I'm honest with my builder, he's going to rip me off. And, if I tell him I want to spend $1 million and the house only costs 800,000 to build, he's just going to pocket the extra 200 grand. And it's like, no, a good, reputable builder is going to charge a fair markup for his work and for his professional services that he provides. But things cost what they cost. Clients drive the cost of custom homes. That's it. We try to help them come up with an overall budget of, hey, based off of, you've told me you want a 4-car garage and you want a big patio and you want these certain things, do they want automation system that could potentially add $100,000 in budget? Let's come up with an overall budget number that's probably based off of some prices per square foot in my mind, but I'm not really telling them that. And at least it comes up with an overall budget. And so we say, hey, based off of what you're describing, I think your budget needs to be $1 million. And they say, well, we only have 800,000 to spend. Well, then let's talk about what we can do to get it closer to that. Mm-hmm. But you got to start somewhere, because you don't want to talk to somebody that has a $500,000 budget and that it's going to cost $1 million to build. It's wasting both of your times if you move much further.
Right. So there has to be a reality check for people.
For sure.
Quite often that they just can't get what they want necessarily.
Yeah.
If their budget's $1 million and they want $1.5 million worth of stuff, something's got to give, right?
Something's got to give. Yeah. Are they willing to give up on the size of the house or the finishes that are inside the house? They've got to be willing to sacrifice something.
Yeah. So we see people who talk to builders and they say, well, this guy's charging $400 a square foot, or he threw out $400 square foot as a range. This other guy said he can do it for $250. Man, I mean, to make my budget work, I'm going to go with the guy that can do it for $250. Yep. So what is somebody getting for $250 that they're,
Yeah. Well, and I think what the client's got to do in that situation when they talk to builders and they see such a broad range, ask each of the builders for their standard set of specifications. And I mean, you and I know, especially with our mutual friend Toner, like what are their weatherproofing features that they're putting in there? Are they putting a drainage plane in? Are they doing, stucco's become really popular. Are they doing stucco the right way? Because it's really cheap to do stucco the wrong way, and it's catastrophic, but it's pretty expensive to do it the right way. And so are they doing it the right way? Those kind of things those aren't necessarily decisions that clients are a part of, but there's differences between builders, as for us, a standard for us is a standalone dehumidifier in every house. That's $5,000 or whatever it is, $4,000 or $5,000. But if this other builder at $250 a foot, he's not doing that. And we've found that that's best practice. And so there's certain things that the clients just they've got to educate themselves. They can't just ask a price per square foot and then say, all right, let's go with the cheapest one.
this process of delving into what people can afford, should afford, what they can get for their money. We call that the design build process. You can call it a pre-construction services process or a project development process. But talk about why that process is kind of the right way to go about building a custom home or designing a custom home.
What we have found is a team approach to building a custom home is what works. And so there's the kind of key members of that team we feel like are the builder, the architect, the interior designer, the structural engineer, or the engineer, because oftentimes we need civil engineering as well. And then we would, add in a building performance specialist in there. And so we feel like you have to have all members of the team there from the beginning that all are aware of that budget and the goals of the client. And they walk through that process together. Because if, architects are amazing at drawing beautiful projects. Unfortunately, oftentimes they have an unrealistic view of the cost. And so
Right.
the client goes to an architect before they've ever talked to a builder. Architect designs them their dream home, and then they send it out to me to put together a proposal on, and it's, $500,000 more than they wanted to spend. Well, now I'm the bad guy because I'm too expensive. And so they either have to figure out how to get more money, or they've got to chop up this beautiful home that they just designed and fell in love with. And so better to, from the beginning, as we're going along, hey, remember you told me your budget was $1 million. What you're asking the architect to draw right now, that's probably going to be more like $1.2 million. Hey, you never mentioned to me that you wanted that conditioned wine room. That's probably a $50,000 budget line item. Are you okay with that? I didn't have that in my initial rough budget. That's going to put us over budget. And they can be involved in that decision. And then when you get to the end, and they are over budget, you can remind them, hey, remember when we talked about the wine room and I told you it wasn't included? You said you were okay with it. It doesn't fix the problem, but it at least makes it more palatable for them because they've been made aware of it before then.
So what would you say if people were hesitant to engage in that pre-construction project development because maybe they're scared that they're not going to get the best deal, or that they're going to be locked into using a builder kind of before they're ready to be locked into using a builder?
Unfortunately, I don't even want to say the industry standard, but the stereotype standard is I need to get 3 bids. I don't know if clients really think about that. Like, do you realize what's happening when you get those 3 bids? Basically, me as a builder, at this point now, we charge when we put together a detailed estimate. But if you're getting a free bid from a builder, are you really getting his best bid, or is he's either throwing together the cheapest thing possible in order to win the bid, and he knows that he's going to kill you with change orders later, or he's not really spending that much time on it and it's just going to be high because he figures, hey, if I get it, at least I'm high and I'll make good money on it. And so the beauty of that team approach, where we really encourage our clients, interview some builders that, build within that general budget range that you're comfortable with, but then pick a builder to go through that process with before they've ever given you any detailed pricing. Because then that builder can be your advocate. They can, if they know your budget and a number from their painting contractor comes back higher than they expect, they don't just throw it in the budget and think, well, I'm going to make a little bit more off of that. They think, hey, they go back to the painter and say, hey man, this is really higher than the last couple projects have been. What's the reason for that? And they really will be your advocate. I mean, we are professionals, and yes, we need to make money, but we're not out to screw the clients and to try to get rich off of one project. We really, if they'll trust us, again, that's this whole thing is they've got to trust us from day one, and we've got to earn that trust, but they've got to trust us that we are going to be their advocate, and that whether it's me putting the estimate together, my estimator, that we are spending the time really figuring out the best way to get that house that they want within the budget that they have.
You said that you charge a fee for project development now, and we do the same thing. What kind of fee do you charge? Like, what's a general cost to somebody to do that?
I think it ranges. It's all obviously going to be on the size of the house. If a client already has a complete set of drawings and they just want us to put together a detailed estimate, that's generally 80 to 100 hours of my estimator's time. And so we come up with an hourly rate. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say it's $115, $125 an hour. What's that going to be? $10,000? If we're going through the entire design process and I know that, hey, not only is my estimator going to spend that 80 to 100 hours, I'm also going to spend another 30 or 40 or 50 hours meeting with the architect and the
Right.
client and walking through that, then obviously it's going to go up from there. But it sounds like a lot, and I think to clients it feels like an unnecessary expense. But what you're doing is you're paying to have that team together from day one and walk through the entire process with you. And I think it can ultimately help reduce cost because we're there for the entire process. And I remember things that you said you wanted that the architect forgot about. It's a lot cheaper to draw them in the plans now than it is I'm fully framed and sheetrocked, and then you remember that you wanted whatever, and we have to spend a ton of money fixing it.
So spending $10,000 or $15,000 up front could save you 10 or 15 or more easily during the build process.
Absolutely.
Just one item could pay for itself,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
If you're in this design process, this pre-construction process, and a client keeps making decisions to increase the scope, let's add that wine room, whatever, and you've told them, hey, your budget's going up. But then we get to the end, and here's your final contract, sir, and it was going to be $1 million, and now it's 1.5. What happens then? What do you do once you've warned them about it, and you go all the way to the end, and they're having a meltdown?
Hopefully, we've built up enough trust that it's not a complete meltdown. We actually just had one recently that, they came to us and said, hey, our budget's $900K. And I think our first round of the proposal came back at like 1.2. And, we said, hey, there's some things we can do to get it down. But really, they came to us with a set of completed drawings. We said, really, with these drawings, we don't think we're going to get much lower than 1.1, maybe a little bit underneath that. And so they said, well, I think we want to wait to build up our finances and maybe readdress this in 6 to 9 months and see what costs have done at that point in time. And so they trusted us. They're like, we want to use you as our builder. We're bought in to y'all, but we literally don't have the money right now. And so let's wait and see if it can still happen. So that's best case scenario. Oftentimes, unfortunately, you do have that meltdown. And I mean, all you can do, we have to remember, I think it's easy as builders. We get so tied up in all of the problems that we're facing every day, from subcontractors to clients being upset. We forget that we are getting the chance to build people's homes. This is the place where they spend most of their time. This is the place where they're going to raise their family, the place where they escape from work. And so to remember how big of an investment that is, but how big of a deal it is that they invite us into their homes to do that. And to not be overly difficult with that conversation, and just to be empathetic and say, hey, I'm really sorry that it came this far over budget. I thought that we had done, our due diligence in explaining to you where we had gone over budget. I wasn't surprised by this final number because I thought we had all these conversations. And so, here's where we're at. What do you want to do? And you let them make that decision. Sadly, there's some clients that will throw the hissy fit and they'll be like, okay, let's do it. And you're like, okay, where'd the extra $500,000 come from? But there are some that they just say, yeah, we can't do it. And they move on, and maybe they find another builder that can do it for that. But
or that says they can.
Says they can. That's the tricky part. That's the other thing, is anytime you got that low ball offer, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop of the change orders. It's just, if you're really specific in your plans and the finishes that you want to put into that, things cost what they cost. If you're working with a reputable builder, we're all, if not using the same contractors, some of the same contractors and the same level of contractors, we're all getting similar pricing. Yeah, you might be paying $1 a square foot cheaper for your framing than I am, or I might be paying, $20 a linear foot less for my cabinet guy to build cabinets than you are, but it's minimal.
Yeah, right.
What determines the cost is the finishes that the clients choose to put in there.
And even the difference in markup between two builders might not make a giant difference. If I'm not charging this, but let's say I'm charging 25%, you're charging 20%. That 5% difference in markup's not going to swing a budget from $1 million to $1.5 million.
Exactly.
So
no, there's not so much.
Something is being left out of the budget if there's that much of a discrepancy, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of the other things that this builder that Brian and Heather decided to work with did, is he said he's going to do a cost plus contract. There's two kinds of contracts for people who are listening that don't really know about this stuff. There's a fixed price where I give you a price, and that is the price unless you change something and there's a change order. A cost plus contract is when whatever my costs are, I pass those along to you, and I apply a percentage markup to it. So
or a fixed fee.
So If there was a $500,000 worth of materials and my cost plus markup is 20%, I make $100,000. People are attracted to that because they say, well, we can control those costs. We can pick and choose what we do. There's transparency. There's a lot of reasons that people are attracted to that. But what are some of the fallbacks to using or the downfalls to using a cost plus contract?
Yeah. So we, when we first started, we did all cost plus. And I'm not saying this is true of all cost plus builders, but for me, honestly, I think it was a laziness on my part. If I didn't want to put forth the amount of time that I should have in estimates. And so it's a lot easier if the risk isn't on me, if the risk is on the client, it's a lot easier to just throw together an estimate. And if I made a mistake, you as the client really have to pay for it. I'm not saying that's what all cost plus builders do, but for us, ultimately what it came down to was it when it's cost plus, the client feels like they should have a say in which subcontractors are used. They don't realize that, for us, when we say we've been working with a painter for 5 years or with a framer for 10 years, it's not just that I know him and I know his kids' names. It's that he knows my expectations. I don't have to spend a ton of time. I still punch his house, but I don't have to spend a ton of extra time catching all these details that another framer the client found that's, $2 a square foot cheaper missed all of the details. And therefore I have to spend a bunch of extra time on my end catching all of those mistakes that he made. Well, that's no skin off the homeowner's back because that's my time. And they're not paying me hourly. They're paying me a fee. And so obviously they want it less expensive so that my fee is lower. We also have run into a lot of issues where, if there's a mistake, either a mistake that's made or the easiest example that I always give is drywall patches. There are always drywall patches at the end of a project. And, the electricians often have to cut quite a few holes. Maybe it's an outlet that was covered up or they've got an outlet that's not working and they realize there's a nail in the wire. Well, the client sees that $800 charge from the sheetrocker and they said, well, I don't want to pay this. Your electrician should have to pay this. Well, it's not the electrician's fault that there was a nail in his wire. Well, whose fault is that? I guess technically it's maybe my trim carpenter or my frame carpenter, but it's just, there's so many things like that, again, that relationship with our subs, we're not a real back charge heavy builder. Like if sub makes a mistake, then okay, let's just figure out a way to fix it. And I'm not going to penalize you for, making that mistake. I heard somebody on a podcast say years ago, building a custom home means that you are building a prototype every single time. This has never been done before. And so there's going to be mistakes that are made. And in a cost plus scenario, who pays for those mistakes? And the client does not want to have to pay for those mistakes. And it's just, it just means you're having that same, even if it's not an argument, even if it's just a discussion, it's a discussion that you have to keep having, it felt like over and over. And it's just exhausting. So,
yeah. So when there's a fixed price contract, you can have a cushion or a contingency built into the contract to take care of the situations,
exactly.
right? Okay, so we're going to change gears again. We talked about some of the negatives and the wrong ways to go about things, and then the right ways. But tell me about your dream customer. Like what's a builder's dream customer?
I think jokingly, you want to say, oh, somebody that doesn't have a budget at all, or it's not a particular person, it's not a particular budget. It's honestly somebody that trusts us. And that's the bottom line, is that every time we have an issue that comes up on the job site, that I'm not stressed about calling them because I realize that, they are understanding and they trust me and that they trust that, we are watching the job and mistakes still happen sometimes. And, as long as we're providing a sensible, solution to that mistake, then that they trust us and let us go on with it. So, I heard a podcast recently about a lady that had built a home in Austin, and she was talking about you're familiar with the tab contract and the price escalation clause. So if lumber is particularly the most volatile one right now. If lumber spikes, then we have a clause in our contract that says that we can charge the client for that difference in the cost. And she said that her builder came to her and said, hey, your lumber package increased by, it was either 30 or 50 grand. I can't remember. And so she said her and her husband talked about it that night. And she was like, we had a decision to make. Do we fight this? Do we throw a hissy fit? she was like, ultimately what we realized is just, it's not his fault. He's not overcharging us for a mistake that he made. This is just the market that we're in. And they decided to pay it. And she said, I really feel like there was a lot of instances where I know that he had two choices to make. He could go, the best route or kind of the good route. And he went the best route. And she's like, I really feel like a lot of that's because he trusted us, because we didn't try to screw him that very first issue that came up. And so it's all about that trust and building that trust between the client and the builder.
On the flip side of that, what kind of person is the builder's nightmare, or what kind of person should not even try to go through this custom home building process?
There's a lot of people that shouldn't go through the custom home building process. I mean, I think if again, the trust, if you can't trust your builder, you shouldn't go through the process. That's the bottom line. And there's some people that they're either so hands on or they're so controlling that they really just won't let go of that control. And so they just can't go through the process. Luckily, we haven't had any clients that are that bad, but we've had some that, they are very much wanting to maintain control. They maybe want to know about, I had one recently actually that somebody, I think it was the wallpaper installer had come through to prime some walls for a wallpaper that was going in a few weeks later. And then the wood floor guys came to prep for wood floors and it was really dusty. And so dust got all over the freshly primed wallpaper areas, and they were freaking out. They're like, why didn't you tell us that it was going to be dusty? I'm like, well, that's my job. I know that the wood floor guys are going to be dusty when I tell you that they're doing wood floor prep. And she's like, well, we didn't know that. Like, well, again, as a builder, we don't tell clients, we shouldn't have to tell clients every single thing that's happening on the job. Yeah, there's key milestones that we should let them know what's happening, but they're not a builder. They don't need to know every single part and piece. So I think those people that can't let go of that just need the control of knowing exactly who's going to be there at what time and how long they're going to be there. It's too fluid of an industry, and it's, as you know, it's impossible to get all those details. So
yeah, people joke about not building for engineers or attorneys. We've done plenty of jobs for engineers and attorneys that have gone perfectly fine, but I've also had jobs for engineers and attorneys that haven't. And
exactly.
So
I don't think there's necessarily one, somebody in a certain industry. It really is that personality. Are they willing to trust you? Attorneys can be great because they're professionals that are used to being paid for professional services,
right,
and they're busy. And so they're not going to have a ton of time on the job site. I mean, I think that could potentially be another answer to that question is people that want to spend a lot of time on the job site. It's custom. I get it. You want to be there, but the more time clients spend on the job site, I feel like is a direct correlation to issues that come up, just because a lot of times clients, they assume it's being done wrong. They don't realize that you're only seeing half of the process, and yeah, it's going to be right once it's done, but right now it doesn't look like it, and they freak out and blow up your phone. It's like, again, just trust us. If you see something going on, yeah, you can call me and question it, but you don't need to freak out about it and start blowing everybody up. So
we want you involved in the process. We want to see you on the job site, but we don't want you to camp out there and look over our shoulder the whole time.
Nobody wants to work with their boss looking over their shoulder. I mean, you don't want that. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. And so clients need to remember that these subcontractors, they may not always seem like it, but they are skilled at the trade that they do. They really do, for the most part, know what they're doing. Most of them are very good at what they do, and clients just need to trust that they know what they're doing and let them do it. But to stand there and look over a painter's shoulder while he rolls a wall and tell him that he overlapped a seam or something, it's ridiculous.
I'd say that with a good builder, you're going to have good trades, right? But that's not always the case. There's some builders that are going to have trades that I would not trust.
That is true. Good
for
point.
Sure. But yeah, your trades, my trades, we trust them, right?
The baseline assumption here is that it's a good builder with good trades.
Right. I would say the other person that maybe shouldn't go through the process is somebody who is just pushing the limit money-wise or budget-wise, that, they've got this amount of money and that's all they've got, and they're putting everything into it.
True.
Because, man, if they get into it and the lumber prices go up like they have, and they've got to cough up another $50,000 and they have no way to get that.
Yeah.
So if you're already tight with money, you probably shouldn't be building a house
Yep.
just to impress your friends or whatever,
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think, even if there's not a contingency line item within your budget that your builder includes, as a client, you've got to have a certain amount of contingency savings that you have built up, expecting that. It's a custom home. Inevitably, you are going to make changes. You're going to go to a friend's house and see some gee whiz thing that you just have to have in your house. And that's great. We'd love to put that in for you, but it's an extra $20,000. Do you have that? And like you said, there's nothing more frustrating than seeing these things and then you can't put it in your own home, even though you want it, because you're already stretched the limit. So,
Right.
yeah.
But have those conversations early on during the design phase.
Yep.
And kind of know where you're going to be before you even start.
Exactly.
Don't try to
Yeah.
add it at the last minute.
Yeah, and tell clients, honestly, you should have, if we didn't build a contingency into your contract, you should have probably at least a 10% buffer in your personal finances that that I can handle a 10% buffer if the lumber goes up, or if I find that gee whiz thing, or just whatever it is, that you have that there just in case.
Right. So, do you have any horror stories, or if not a horror story, just an example of a project that went really, really badly that you would mind sharing with us? It could be something that you did or something that you've observed someone else do.
Yeah, I mean, I think not keeping control of a client. I don't have necessarily a specific horror story, but I think the times that we've gotten into the most trouble is when we don't set the right expectations with a client from the beginning, and then things slowly start to get off course, and we don't make course corrections. And so, the client, again, it goes back to the trust thing, and the client's they're looking over the sub's shoulders, and we don't say anything about it. And then the next time they're there again, and they actually stop the sub. And then what they don't realize is that when they upset a sub like that, they're going to leave and go to a different job. And it's not like I can just get them back tomorrow. Like, they might disappear for a week or two, or they may say, we've had subs before that say, hey, I can't work on that job site because that client's too crazy. She's too demanding, whatever. I'm not coming back. And it's like, you have to tell the client that, hey, so-and-so is refusing to come back because you did X, Y, and Z. And we have found that it's never a surprise on that client that does that, because you've let them kind of push the envelope throughout the process. And so to just sit down with them, to not be scared to, again, the tab contracts that we use, there is, I don't remember what the term for it is, but there are items in there that the builder basically, not default, but the builder can basically stop the project and say, hey, we are stopping construction, and here's the reason why. And you want to scare the client almost into saying, hey, this can't continue the way it's going. We know where this is headed, and it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be frustration for both of us. And so let's stop. Let's kind of catch our breath, and let's reset expectations so that we can move forward and both be happy moving forward, and not have a miserable process.
Yeah, those are hard conversations to have with a client,
Sure.
saying, I'm going to stop your project if this doesn't improve.
But there's nothing like that to catch. If you really need to catch clients' attention, that is the quickest way to catch their attention, because anybody doing a construction project, they don't want to see a job site that's just sitting still. Worst case scenario, and it's a last resort by any means, but occasionally you do have to go to that. So,
Yep. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you taking the time today to come and talk to us.
yeah,
And it was
been my
great to have
pleasure.
you on. And if folks want to work with Sneller Custom Homes, what should they do?
Yeah, so best way to find us, snellercustomhomes.com. You can look for us on House, Instagram, Facebook, but started our website, and then you can find us from there. So appreciate you having me. It's been fun.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
All right.